Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Sean McClure, and I am presenting to you today my WGU Capstone Task 4 project. It's been a hard road being diagnosed with AFib and weather changes and computers tearing up and all that stuff. So most of my master's degree, I got finished in a little over 4 months, I think 4.5. But this last go is taking me a little bit longer, but I persevered and I'm getting it done. So I'm going to go over my project with you today. We can see that the title page, a capstone presented to the Teachers College facility of Western Governors University in partial fulfillment of the requirements for the degree of Master of Science, Curriculum and Instruction. So first I'm going to scroll down to the topic and the problem. And I'm using a copy of mine as I go through this as well. So if I look off of the screen, it's not because I'm not focused on what's on the screen. I'm just looking at mine because it helps me understand what I've done and what I haven't. So as we can see, chapter 1, the topic and problem, I have worked with special needs students for over 23 years in my county, and we have a lot of very effective curriculum that we use. And one of the things that we had already been using is Scientific Research Associates, SRA, decoding curriculum, but the decoding curriculum was always used in conjunction with comprehension. So as I was doing this, it led me to my research topic of the decoding B2 is what I'm going to be using is reading intervention as my topic. And my problem is there was no effective research that had been done that gives you effective analysis or data on how well the students perform when they're just doing the decoding aspect of the program instead of with decoding and comprehension. So that led me to my topic and my problem there that I showed you, and the research, which I will scroll down just a moment. I'm going to go over this first, actually. Right here, I said intervention. Intervention is a strategy that's used for intervening when students are struggling with their academics. Interventions can include special education programs, and a lot of people think that it's just special education because there's some severe needs, but it can be any range of academic need that a student needs. Policies, procedures, health campaigns, and improvement for an entire population that struggles to decode words or understand basic math skills. So this comprehensive action research study is going to be completed on. I'm going to go over my research question. It's going to be completed on these students that I had picked out. So you can see my research population was 5 students in a 7th grade intervention class that struggled with decoding skills. And which leads me to the next one, is my research question. And my research question was approved. And the question was, it led me to think how effective decoding would be when it was separated from the comprehension aspect. So my question was, what impact does the corrective reading curriculum decoding strand B2 have on the 5 7th grade students that I studied ability to decode words as measured in the pre and post test assessment that I did? So, and we will go next to the instruments that we used. So the instruments that we used were the pre and post test. And I'll show you just a little bit later in the appendage on that one. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and go down to the very bottom and show you that one. So bear with me as I'm scrolling down just a little bit because that one's next. I'm going through the actual thing from WGU that I printed off, so I'll make sure that I present everything to you guys. So as you can see here, it's a little bigger. It's actually a little smaller, so I'm going to make it a little bit bigger so you can see it as I'm talking to you about this. But this was my set of words that I used for the pre and post assessment. And these words were based off of the actual book that I used, the 10 to 12 lessons that I used. excuse me, as I was going through this research project and I was actually completing the study. So these are the words that every student used, and they were the same for the pre and post test assessment, and those were kept under lock and key where nobody could change them or anything like that. So this I put on here as an example. Actually, every student is on here, but I'm going to show you this one. It's actually, this is the pre-assessment for one of my students, and they got 16 out of 60 of the words. And then if I scroll down just a little bit more, that same student, after completing just the decoding aspect of the decoding B2 separate from comprehension, the same student got 46 out of 60. So it was a very significant change. So we're going to go back up to the participants, even though I kind of already talked about them. We had 5 students originally. Actually, 6 had started and 1 moved off in the very beginning, so I didn't even count that one. And on my last tasks, 5 were initially studied, and then 1 actually moved away. So it left 4 in the end. But we can see here that the participants, a total of 5 participants in the research study, the researcher's special education intervention room consisted of only 5 students in a small group. And that's typically how the intervention is done, especially for special education. Sometimes in a general education classroom, you might have a little bit larger groups, maybe 8, maybe 9 sometimes, but usually it's very small. So each student's going to be signed a specific letter. It protected their identity. So I did student 1, student 2, student 3, student 4, or A, B, C, and D, just so we wouldn't give away who the students were and things like that. So 7th grade students consisted of 4 males and 1 female. 3 of these students were Hispanic and 2 Caucasian. All 5 students fell under the socioeconomic disadvantages demographic as well as learning disabled. And the students varied slightly in their ability levels, and all 5 had IEPs. So the next one is the method that I use. So I'm going to go ahead, like again, I showed you the pre and post test assessment. So the data collection that I used on those is the stakeholders doing this action research study on corrective reading will be the students, the parents, the researcher, and the curriculum and instruction supervisor for the county, because she also will see this paper when I'm completely finished. So they have an invested interest in the outcome and have expressed interest in the results of this study. So I think that they'll be pleased on this because we already implemented the program, but not as a separate entity. But we can see from the data analysis, the pre and post test assessment was developed directly from the Decoding B2 book. And I'm going to go ahead and scroll down and show you what that looked like down at the very end. So this is the actual book. We started with lessons 42. And you can see that it has the actual decoding section. So most of them had 3, most lessons had 3, some of them had 4. I think there might have been one that had 5, but then you have the comprehension aspect of it, which is the reading and the questions after. But what I did with this one is sought to figure out with the research question what the decoding B2 aspect did to improve student outcomes with just the decoding section. And that was measured by the pre and post test assessment that I showed you below, or above, actually, just above this. So you can actually see that it went all the way to 52, and I think a few of them we might have actually went a little bit over. I think we did 53 and 54 as well, because it was pretty much was based on the same story. And I didn't want to change the validity of the program. I just wanted them to be able to finish the whole story for them. But the actual sections of these, the words that I used on the pre and post test assessment, were taken from all of these words here that we were decoding separately. So the method that I used was obviously the methodology. Sorry, that's hard for me to say. Is the I'm going to go scroll down as I go back up here. I'm going to look at my paper. Sorry, I'm working with a small desk today because my computer tore up and I'm using my nephew's. So But again, like I said, the action research study that we're examining today will explore the impact of corrective reading decoding B2 strand only, not the comprehension. So the students in this lesson have a slow progression from basic word attack involving early phonics to putting CVC words together to decode within basic sentences to more difficult sounds within the reading passages. So that's typically how corrective reading works. But when I did this research study itself, I took the comprehension aspect of it out, put the decoding by itself, and just used the book and how it told you on like part one, part two, and part three, and went through the decoding aspect of each lesson with the student. And then obviously I measured the pre-test assessment and then how well they did after. And you can see from the one student, they went from knowing 16 out of 60 to 46 out of 60. So they made significant progress. But finding my methodology here for just a moment. This is the first time I've actually ever recorded myself on screen, believe it or not. So it's taken me just a hot minute. But the research design, what is the impact that the corrective reading curriculum B2 had on decoding achievement for the small 7th grade population? Now I'm getting to the method or the methodology of this. This is a quantitative action research study, and we use the pre and post test to indicate growth and show the effectiveness of the B2 decoding strand of corrective reading. The data collection instruments aligned because both of the data collection instruments are going to show you evidence needed to show that corrective reading decoding separate is or is not, but now that we know, was influential in affecting growth for the 5 students that I measured. So and again, I went over the data collection and the instruments. We used the SRA decoding B2, and I'm going to show you the book if I can find it here in the actual, the paper here. I have a picture of the book. So this is the pre and post test. So those were what we used to measure. And then each student, I put their before and after the pre and post test on here as well to show you the results. And then this is the actual book. And it goes all the way through lesson 52. And I thought I had a picture of what the book actually looked like on the front, but I don't think I do. So I'm going to pull that back up real quick and I'm going to minimize my screen here and show you what it looks like. So this is an example of what the actual the book actually looks like. You can see right here, this is the teacher's guide, and typically it's spiral, and then we have also actually have the student book. And I wasn't allowed to bring anything like that home with me, and technically they said some of these things were confidential, so I didn't get a picture of that. I think that's probably why I didn't put that picture in there, is because we weren't allowed to reproduce that stuff. So I'm just showing you what it looks like now. This was the teacher's copy that I used, and this is the actual student book. So each student had one of these, and they actually had the workbook that went with it. So it was just basically a floppy worksheet that they could pull out after it. Okay. So in conclusion, actually, let's go ahead and talk about the analysis as well, because I had that one next. So we talked about the data collection instruments and methods. We used the book, the teacher's book. We used the workbook and the student book, and I used the pre and post test assessments. I had those under lock and key the entire time in the actual my supervising teacher's room in a filing cabinet, so the results were not skewed. I had those, and then I put them together and analyzed them and did some data analysis on it at the end. but I want to talk about a little bit before beginning the study. The researcher, I created the pre and post assessment, obviously, and it took about an hour to create those tests because I wanted it to be something separate from comprehension. I had a few of the ones that were already mixed in with comprehension, but I wanted it to just be the decoding section of B2. So I used Google Sheets to do that as well. And the data security and confidentiality was kept 100% during the whole thing. And now we are actually to the conclusion. When compared to the other studies on the action research study of what impact does the corrective reading curriculum decoding strand have on the 5, but at the end 4 students that I examined, ability to decode words as measured in the pre and post test assessment. And like I showed you before, based on student 1, they started out with 16 out of 60 words that they got correct. And I'm going to find that again for you real quick just to show you. And then we'll go through student 2, 3, and 4 real quick as well, because I want you to see the overall data for that. So student 1, in the beginning, the pre-test, 16 out of 60 words. Then student 1 jumped to 46 out of 60 words after using it just separate, the B2 separate from comprehension. Then we can see, as in student, I've actually moved this research study from Word to Google Docs several times, so that's probably why it looks like there's a space a little bit there. But student 2, pre-test assessment, did 21 out of 60. And then post-assessment, 51 out of 60. So very significant. Student 3, pre-test assessment, 5 out of 60. And then 9 out of 60. And this student was actually identified as needing intensive special education intervention. So they were also actually tested on another tier after this, because my supervising teacher saw this, and we saw that they needed a little bit more basic CBC, phonics, graphemes, phonemes, intervention, things like that. So we started them on a program that's a little bit lower. So it actually identified for him that even separate from the comprehension, this wasn't working for him. Student 4, pre-test, 31 out of 60. And then in the end, 57 out of 60. So now I'm going to show you actually the data that I compiled, the analysis of all this, and show you what impact this actually had. So you can see right here, the data set, the pre-assessment was the student 1, student 2, student 3, and student 4 is what I compiled. And then the post-assessment I did separately based on the number of words that they got correct on the post-assessment. And then I actually compiled it and put it together to show you the growth. And so you can see in student 1, they jumped here all the way up to here, which was around 43, 46 words. Student 2 obviously jumped from 21 to over 47, 48 words. Student 3 was the one that we identified that actually needed more intensive intervention, and he started receiving that as soon as this research was over. And then actually student 4 from about 26, 27, and jumped all the way up to almost 100% here at 57. So the conclusions were that it was effective. The impact was highly effective for the students to have decoding separate from comprehension. So that being said, the strength of the study was that it showed significant evidence that decoding B2 done separately was highly effective in producing growth in the specific population. The strength is also that the SRA curriculum it's very scientifically sound curriculum that's already produced evidence based on results when combining aspects of the decoding and comprehension together to improve reading gaps. So But we can also see down here the weakness of the study that I did find is that the research was done with a small group of students. Typically, intervention in my county is done with small groups, like I had said, and it was also done in an extended time frame, which could have led to a little bit of error in data collection with the students being there and not being there for weather. But like I said again, it was kept under lock and key. As soon as they finished the pre assessment, I put it up, locked it up, and then after the program was over, I didn't access that until they completed the post test assessment as well. So you can see that the growth from the 4 students was collected and meticulously accounted for, but it would be deemed more valid, like I said right here, for a group of at least 10 students instead of 4 by the end. The research was valid and accurate, but it would lead to more credibility in the research field with a broader data collection from a larger group of students. So, and what I was going to show you here at the end, recommendations for further investigation is after I finished this, I actually talked to the masters. Actually, I talked to the curriculum and instruction supervisor for my county, and I recommended that at least one teacher from every 3rd to 6th grade RTI classroom participates in the countywide research project to further test the question: what impact does the corrective reading curriculum decoding B2 strand have just on their students from 3rd grade to 6th grade? Because it's based on, yes, they are 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th, but based on their ability level is what actual book they go into. So decoding B2, or you could have decoding B1, decoding B3, decoding B4 based on their ability level. So, but if we separated all of those decoding aspects and did some research on that, we could see whether or not all of SRA's decoding is effective in a larger population separate from comprehension. So that was my recommendation for further testing. But you can also see that I effectively put all my references and APA citations in here. I loved researching this. You can also see I loved researching this because it helped me become better in my intervention strategies. And I've actually moved into a new position in my county, and I'm working in general education in 1st grade. And we have identified so far 3 students in the classroom that I help in that actually needs more intensive intervention. So I plan to utilize some of the things that I learned from this research project, from this capstone, in the actual classroom with the students that I have now. So, but we can see that the lesson plans, I pulled everything from my lesson plans. And I think that may be it. Okay, so they're actually, you can see that a little bit better, but that's the pre and post test assessment. They were exactly the same. Then I actually put this down here again as well, because when I did, there's the picture of the book. Sorry about that. I didn't go down far enough. But so you can actually see the informed consent, things like that. But all of this was compiled over an extensive period of time. And so I'm going to recap everything. So I talked about it helps me get through things. And if anything was ever jumbled, I'm going to go back through and explain this. I went through the title page with you. And I went through the topic, the problem, the research question, the instruments that were used to complete the research, everything, including the pre and post test assessment, the books, the teacher workbooks, things like that. I talked about the participants that were studied, which were super fun to work with. I talked about the method being quantitative action research study. And we actually talked about the conclusion and what we found from this, and then we talked about what we could do further to even to make this what weaknesses the study did have, make it even better and even more valid for the county. And I'm waiting to hear back from the curriculum supervisor to see if there's anything that I can help them do. And thank you guys for working with me through my diagnosis of AFib, through weather, through computer mishaps and job changes and things like that. And if I need to work on anything or redo anything, please let me know. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for working with this with me. And if there's anything else that I can do for you guys, please let me know. And I hope to hear from you guys soon. Have a great evening.